we delivered a bipartisan bill to fix the border with the Republican senator appointed by the Republican caucus to cut the deal. And within 24 hours before the ink was even dry, Republican senators decided they don't want a bipartisan bill to fix the border. They want to pretend they never asked for a bipartisan border bill, because what they actually want is chaos, because that's what Donald Trump says he wants. What the hell just happened?
Today, Senate Republicans killed a border deal, they voted it down, that they themselves had demanded and spent months negotiating. It's all part of a sustained effort to appreciably damage our country, to make things worse in America so that Donald Trump has a better chance of being elected running against an incumbent. That's it. If you think that is hyperbole, okay, I want you to listen to the very conservative, I mean really conservative Republican senator who was the key to negotiating this deal, appointed by his caucus to do so, James Lankford of Oklahoma, on the floor of the Senate today, explaining what the hell just happened.
I had a popular commentator 4 weeks ago that I talked to that told me flat out, before they knew any of the contents of the bill, nothing was out at that point, that told me flat out, if you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you, because I do not want you to solve this during the presidential election.
Seems pretty clear what happened with the Republican senators who voted to sink this deal. One of the people who worked closely with Senator Lankford, who had a front row seat to this entire spectacle, is Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, the chief Democratic negotiator on this deal, and he joins me now. So, Senator, it was like a week and a half ago when this bill was coming together, and I was reporting on it, and I was talking to various people, and people were wondering what was going to be in it, and I was talking to our team here. I was like, let's get Senator Murphy. I want to argue with him about the provisions of this border bill. But we're not going to do that interview because it died. It's not. So at some point in the future, we'll argue about what's in it. But let's just table that for a moment, okay? I want just retrace this. For my 20 years covering this issue, the trade is this. They want more border security and enhancement. Democrats want a path to citizenship. This time around, the negotiation didn't have a path to citizenship. It was entirely on their terms in order to get Ukraine funding, right?
Well, I mean, Chris, that's been a failed play for 20 years. So right. You are right that has been the Democratic strategy for 30 years, maybe. And it has failed to deliver for the people we care about most, the undocumented Americans that are in this country. This is also not 2013 any longer when we ran that play last. Back then, there were a couple hundred people showing up every day applying for asylum. Today, on some days, there are 8,000. And the reality is that the bulk of this country does not think that that's right or sustainable and wants us to change the reality at the border. So I know there's a temptation for Democrats, and I know you weren't looking for this argument, but I think there is a temptation to just run the same play we always run because we know how to run it. But when it hasn't worked and when the country is actually demanding that we do something to make the border more manageable, I do think we have a right and a responsibility to adjust to that reality. Now, this bill still had in it some really important things for migrant rights, including a right to representation and earlier work permits and the biggest expansion of visas in 30 years. It's not a pathway to citizenship, but it is something substantial for people that actually care about migrants. But in the end, all of this didn't matter because, as it turns out, Republicans are just absolutely allergic to fixing the problem at the border because they are so used to having this be their perennial election year issue. They just couldn't give it up in the end. So they asked James Lankford to cut this deal. He did exactly what they asked. Mitch McConnell was in the room for the entirety of the negotiation. And in the end, even Mitch McConnell voted against it. Only 3 others joined James Lankford on the floor today to support the bipartisan border fix bill.
What's interesting in your response there, I can sense from you that, you spent a lot of time working on this. This wasn't you were proud of this bill. Like to your point, like on the substance, on the merits, it's like, it wasn't like, well, we have to do this to get X, Y, and Z, and we're backed into a political corner. Like, you think that this is a real issue, that there were real serious people trying to do it in a way that was going to be a classic sort of give and take, half a loaf situation, but was going to be better than status quo and basically make things better for the country at the border, like a net improvement that you were proud to go around and try to get votes for and pass and have become law.
Hey, listen, I think you were watching the issue of migration take down left and center left governments all around the world right now. I think we are at the point where if we didn't bring some sense of order to the border, if we didn't make a big down payment on reform to the asylum system, we were going to have a really hard time holding on to a consensus in this country that we should keep legal immigration pathways alive. And so I am of the belief that this was a moment where you had to show some big bipartisan momentum and progress on the border, or you would never, ever have the ability to try to rescue the undocumented Americans that desperately need help. So, yes, I was ready to sell this bill to my colleagues. And, of course, my Democratic colleagues did support it. I think about 80-90% of Democrats voted for it today. 80-90% of Republicans voted against it. And the silver lining here is that at least we know where Republicans are. Republicans have definitively decided that they want chaos at the border. They don't want to solve this problem. And maybe an issue that a lot of folks thought was going to be a net negative for Democrats going into the election has the ability to at least draw us even, as more people just don't believe Republicans' arguments that they want to do something when they had the chance and they turned it down.
I mean, there's two things that are striking to me. And you've been working on this for 20 years. I've been covering it for 20 years. You know, people forget, they did have unified control of all of governance for 2 years when Donald Trump was elected, and they did squat, bupkis, nothing, zero. They cut corporations' taxes. OK, so it's like if you don't like the negotiation you have to do with Democrats, you could have done it yourself and you didn't. But second of all, what Langford said today, it's like, I don't know how much in the end reality is going to matter to the marginal swing voter. But for him to come out and be like, my colleagues killed this because it's an election year and they want Donald Trump to win, like, that's plain as day. Those are the facts of what happened. And do you think in the end that will matter to the politics of the issue?
Well, you know that it only matters if we repeat it. And I do think that Democrats, especially over the last several years, have become so used to being on the defensive on this issue of immigration that we just refuse to talk about it, and we let Republicans define the issue. We now have the opportunity to go on the offensive, right? We have the receipts. We can show people that there was a breakthrough bipartisan bill that, if passed, would have brought some order to the border. Frankly, the reason Republicans turned against it was because we did too good a job. We actually were going to give President Biden tools that would be able to control numbers, and Republicans couldn't imagine a world in which they didn't have the border to run on this November. So I think we can flip the script on Republicans. I wasn't looking to gain political advantage. I was trying to solve a problem, but they don't want to solve the problem. So our obligation is to go on offense and explain to voters that Republicans are not sincere when they say they want to fix the problem, because they had an opportunity, and almost to a person, they ran for the hills.
Senator Chris Murphy, who spent a lot of time on that, but, you know, that's being a U.S. Senator in our day and age. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.